All righty, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you for that introduction, Scott. It's wonderful to be here with you. And bonjour tout le monde et bienvenue à un nouvel épisode d'Entre Nous. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Entre Nous. That's the discussion series by the Nous Foundation. My name is Tiffany Guillory Thomas, and I am the host for this series. And it's really great to be back with everyone. And also, bon moi l'héritage créole. That's Happy Creole Heritage Month to everyone. And in this month of October, we celebrate what it means to be Creole and or what it means to live in a region that is Creole. And we also in Louisiana, just like in other parts of the world, we're thinking about what has happened, what's going on right now and what we're holding on to, and also our hope in the future. And with that in mind, we have an enriching conversation in store today. This afternoon, I have both the pleasure and the privilege of talking to the incomparable Fatima Shaik, whom it was a pleasure to meet in person in June at the gala for Nous Foundation. And for me, I really feel like a newcomer because people have known her for so long and her work for so long. And so if any of you have been talking about and studying Louisiana history, you have surely come across her name and know her name, and have also surely seen the accolades for this last book that she's written, Economy Hall. She's the winner of the 22nd Louisiana Writer Award and this latest book right here, Economy Hall. Is also the Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities 2022 Book of the Year. And so welcome, Fatima Shaik.
Thank you, Tiffany. It's nice to be here.
It's nice to see you. And where are you joining us from today?
I'm joining you from New York right now. I live up in New York half the time, or maybe a little bit more than half the time, and then I'm in New Orleans the rest of the time.
That's awesome. And are you a professor as well?
Well, I was. I taught for 28 years at St. Peter's University, which is right across the water in Jersey City. But I retired 2 years ago, so now I can do this sort of thing in the middle of the day.
That's awesome. That's awesome for us, for sure. And you can come to Louisiana too.
That's right.
Appreciate that. All right. And so speaking of New Orleans, okay. So you were born in the 7th Ward, or is that where you grew up, in the 7th Ward in New Orleans?
Yes, I grew up in New Orleans. I went to Corpus Christi School, and so many of the families that you'll see the last names that are in Economy Hall were some of my classmates at Corpus Christi School. They had the same surname, so that sort of got me going on this book.
Wow, that's awesome. So can you tell us and relate to us what growing up in the 7th Ward in New Orleans, what that has meant to you, and how has that shaped you, and eventually, as you would come to write this book, but how has this living in the 7th Ward shaped you?
Well, growing up in the 7th Ward, I found it to be a very close community. Many of the people that I went to school with or that were my neighbors had known each other for 2 or 3 generations. Some of them were French speaking. My mother was French speaking as her first language. The others, I found out that my grandfather on my father's side, who was from India, had actually lived in the 7th Ward, not that far away. So it was really a melting pot. I like to say it's a melting pot of the darker brothers of America. So there were so many people that came into that community, and they were embraced by the community.
Oh, that's awesome. Very interesting. So can you elaborate a little bit more on your family background? You mentioned your mom, you mentioned your dad.
Okay, well, my mom was
Yeah.
from St. Martinville, and so were her parents, and so were, oh boy, I think back several generations, back to the LaSalle family, Pierre LaSalle. And then my dad's family was from around the Cane River area, and they came to New Orleans, I guess about 3 generations before me. But then they also had a little bit from India and just I guess about everywhere in the Western Hemisphere. And they, they all sort of came to that same port of New Orleans.
Absolutely. Oh, wow. Thank you. And so,
Well,
talking
and
about,
Eastern
oh, go
Hemisphere.
ahead.
I should say the Eastern Hemisphere too, because they came
Great.
from India and they came from Africa. So, where didn't we touch, I guess?
Absolutely. And you just brought up a good point. You brought up the point of touching. And I think that's the kind of the theme I'm going to use here as we're talking today. Just at least different points of touching and using Economy Hall and the members of Economy Hall, using them as examples of how all of this history, how people touched one another, and the history touched the people who were the members of Economy Hall. And so you mentioned your dad. So that brings us to the story of even how this book got started. Can you relate to everyone the beginnings of this book and how you got the information that went into this book?
Sure. Well, my dad had a friend, Mr. Wilderson, who taught with him at George Washington Carver High School. They were both counselors in the junior high school. And Mr. Wilderson was a member of the Economy Society. And this was in the late 50s, early 60s. Mr. Wilderson was charged with getting rid of the contents of the hall, which was Economy Hall, because the membership had gotten old and people they weren't participating in the society. They decided to break it up. People had bought all of the furniture, but nobody wanted these old books that were there. So what he did was he had them put on a dump truck, and they were supposed to be going to the dump, but the fella got tired and stopped halfway and parked his car. So my dad went to this fella's house when he found out that these books were written in French. And as I told you, my mom spoke French and read French, and he read French a little bit. So he decided to get the books and bring them home, thinking that he would do something with them at some point. And he didn't, but he left them for me. So I went to the closet maybe 50 years after they had been in there and looked, and that's when I saw the names that were familiar to me from the neighborhood. And I saw that these names had gone back like to 1830s, so I was hooked. I had been a writer by that time, so I was hooked. I just took on this project.
Wow. Wow. That's a fascinating story. And so, so the ledgers are already there. And so that's already a history in itself. But then it took you about how long you think from the beginning to actually completing the book? How long did it take, you think?
It was a good 20 years.
Wow.
And that's New Orleans measurement, right? A good.
A good.
Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, but it was it took me a long time to read it. There were 3,000 pages. It was French handwriting. The French was not always consistent French. It was French that changed along the years. For example, the fauteuil, I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, the chair, right? When he was called, somebody said, well, I guess y'all not talking now. Tell me later if I'm pronouncing it correctly. But the chair, they called the person in charge the chair for a long time. And then as it became a little bit more Americanized, they called him the chairman, Cherman. So which I thought was just really nice. And then later on chairman, but it was a chairman for a good while. Yeah.
Wow. So you see the evolution of the languages as well. And so you translated those 3,000 pages?
I can't say that I translated it because that would have taken skills far beyond mine. But I did read it. I read all of them and I notated every meeting. So I know went on in every meeting. To my knowledge. Now I have a lot more historical knowledge, but at the time, if I saw a name that was familiar to me, or if I saw that it happened around an important event like in 1857, we know that the Dred Scott decision took place, right? So I looked around 1857 to see what they were doing, and I saw that there was a lot of ferment in the society around 1857. There were a lot of people were having a lot of arguments. They were talking a lot about their values and what they believed, so I would stop there. I would get somebody who was a native French speaker to read it with me, and as I say, the woman that I knew, she was a native French speaker. In some sentences she knew, in some sentences I knew, because it wasn't quite French. It was sometimes American French with American syntax, or French syntax. Might be French syntax and a few English words in there. So that was the challenge. So no, I didn't translate it. It would have taken me another 20 years to translate the whole thing, but I do know what went on, and I have a sense of who was there.
Oh, thank you so much. And so it was a bit of a team effort, for sure.
Yeah, it was. I there were about 3 people there, because I was at St. Peter's, so I was lucky enough to have people right down the hallway that I could run over and say, well, what does this sentence mean? For example, Pierre Delisle Dupart, I believe I think it was Joseph Pierre Delisle Dupart. I'm not quite sure, but the earliest one, he was, his documents were in Spanish when he recognized his children. So I had there was a priest down the hall who spoke 18 languages. So I'd run down to his office and say, okay, what is this? And tell me about it. So he translated that part for me, when we were looking into those really old Spanish documents.
Wow. How fortunate to have that person.
Oh, I was really lucky. Things seemed to fall into place, that I was there, that I had people around me, that the books were there, that my school gave me some time off, even just the privilege of working at a place that will allow you time to write and to think. That's a real privilege right there.
It is a privilege. And I was thinking to myself that to read, which I've read how the Economy Hall came about, to read it reads like destiny.
Yeah,
and
like
it does.
Sometimes there are destinies that you choose not to accept. And had I known it was going to be 20 years, I might have chosen differently.
We're so glad you didn't. And so let's talk a little bit about this société. Is it the Société d'économie et d'assistance mutuelle?
Je pense que oui. I think so. That is the name of it. Whether the pronunciation is correct, I never know about pronunciations. But yes, it was a Société d'économie et d'assistance mutuelle, the economy society. Yeah.
Right. So it's like a mutual aid association. So what is that?
A mutual aid association. Lots of people who were immigrants to the country formed mutual aid associations. And these people did too, even though they were second generation by the time they started. A mutual aid association is a group that they help each other. They help each other. In particular, they help each other bury their members, and they help each other in sickness. So in those days, you didn't have health insurance, and you didn't have burial insurance, and you didn't have funeral homes, really. So what these people would do is they joined together. They would give the widow money. They would take care of the children for a while. They would give her money for the children. If somebody was sick, they would pool their money. Well, they had a pool for the secours, right? The people, the help system committee would go and give the money to the doctor to pay for this person's medicine, right? So it functioned like almost like an HMO, in a way, that they would take care of these people. A little bit more than an HMO, because they got very involved with each other's families.
Right. Very connected. And so where is this meeting hall? Is there a way to actually see where the meeting hall is now?
Well, you can see the location, but the meeting hall doesn't exist anymore.
Okay.
The hall was built, the society started in 1836. And about 20 years later, they built a hall, which was 1857 by the time the hall was built. The hall stood from 1857 to 1963. Then the hurricane took it down. So the location of the hall is in the back of Craig's School in New Orleans on Ursuline Street. If you know where the African American Museum is now on Governor Nichols, and you go straight back to Ursuline Street, that's where Economy Hall is.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes, I know exactly where that is. Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
They were there for a really long time. It was like at the time the hall was built, it was like a community center almost, you know. There were concerts there. There were parties to raise money for people's philanthropies, like for the nuns, for the sick, for the orphans. There were political meetings at the time, right before Reconstruction and during Reconstruction. There were meetings to get out the vote, you know. And the Republican Party was held there. The first meeting of the Republican Party of Louisiana was in Economy Hall. So they really functioned for all of New Orleans, you know, because even though they were an organization of free men of color, these were people of color, and they were designated as that. They could not take in members who were not of color. They opened their doors to everybody in the city. So you'll see the German Workers Organization coming there. You'll see the Radical Republicans meeting there. You'll see lots of different people that met in Economy Hall.
Wow. Wow, what a pillar.
Yeah, it was.
A pillar of the community.
It was. It makes me think that is the reason that when people talk about music, because it got to be known as a music hall later, when people talk about music, Economy Hall was one of the musicians said the Carnegie Hall of Jazz, right? And one of the reasons I think it had such a reputation is because it had such a long history as being a very important place before that happened.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for that rich history, and about being the first place for the Republican Party for the first meeting. That's incredible.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to touch on different things. Sure. Touching back on the interview that we had with Dr. Angel Adams Parham when she was here, and we talked about those links between Haiti and Louisiana, Saint-Domingue and Louisiana. And so as your book starts off, you start off with in the beginning, Haiti.
Yeah.
And so how did this immigration into Louisiana from Saint-Domingue, how does it play into the history of the société?
Well, in particular, the person who came from Haiti is sort of the protagonist, the person who carries the story. Even it's a protagonist, and that's a fictional term, but I wrote it with some fictional devices. His family came from Haiti. His mother and his father came from Haiti. I'm not exactly sure what years they came, but most of the people who came around the time of the Haitian Revolution, right? And I'm pretty sure that his father was in the Haitian Revolution, because the person who signed his marriage certificate or notarized certificate was Charles Savory, who was from Haiti. So I'm expecting that they were connected and they knew each other. They both came into New Orleans, you know. So his family came from Haiti. A lot of people came, as you know, during the Haitian Revolution, about 10,000 people came into Louisiana. About 3,000 of them were free people of color. About 3,000 were enslaved. About 3,000, even though that comes out to 9,000, I know, were people who were Europeans. The free people of color and the enslaved made the population of New Orleans, as it was then, much greater in terms of people of color. New Orleans in those early years was about 2/3 Black, people of African descent. So what in particular in the society, the Haitian people from Haiti or Saint-Domingue, joined with people who were native Louisianians who had been like the Crockers, for example. Pierre Crocker was the first president of the Economy Society. His father, I believe, and I don't want to misquote myself, but I'm pretty sure it was his father and not his grandfather, who was part of the Spanish militia. He was from South America. So you saw a lot of people that came during the colonial period were already in New Orleans, and they joined with some of these new immigrants.
Wow. And so you also mentioned, the protagonist, and so Monsieur Bouguil.
That's the way I say it.
Yeah, Bouguil, because that's the name that's still in New Orleans, right?
Yeah. That name is still in New Orleans. That name
So he's the recording secretary, right?
Yeah, he was during a very significant period of time. Yeah.
Okay. And so his family, his mom and dad would have come from Saint-Domingue. And so tell us a little bit about him. What did he end up doing for a living?
Well, I found him on the census records in 1840 as having a school down in the Faubourg Marigny. So he was a school teacher by 1840. He became involved in the freedmen schools later. He was always in education at some point or another, but he was also active politically. So I saw him at that Republican Party organization. And he was active in the society, just taking notes on everybody. He was very expressive. He was a poet also, by avocation. He was a poet. So every once in a while, you see him drop a few lines of poetry. And I saw him like at the Colored Convention, the Louisiana Colored Convention. He spoke there in French. There were people who spoke in English. He spoke in French. So he was well known in the community.
Awesome. What was his first name again?
Ludger, 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 maybe, but I think I have no idea where his name came from.
And was he associated with the Couvent School at a point?
Yes, he was. He was associated. He was one of the early teachers, one of the first teachers at the Couvent School.
Okay. Oh, awesome.
So all that group is all, he's mentioned in the Jean Grandjean journals of, he's mentioned in there when they mention all of the people who helped start the school and who were interested in education.
Awesome. Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And I think he's in Karen Kose Bell's book too, Revolution, Romanticism, and Afro-Creole protest tradition, I think. Yeah.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for that information as well. And you
have to read a lot.
Yes, you did. And these are all books that we treasure. Yeah. We're all reading some of the same things, I believe. Yeah. And so you did talk about in the book, as far as the history of Monsieur Bouguil, you were talking about his mom and his mom's family. And so in the as you're relating that, you also talk about that there were slaves that she owned, but then some that she freed. And so how does those stories inform you on those relationships between the free people of color and then the enslaved population at the same, that are there together?
Yeah, I don't know how much it informed me. I know it brought up a lot of questions.
Okay.
I'm not sure that I got the answers, but I got a lot of new questions because she was from Jeremy, which is in a different part away from Port-au-Prince. And Jeremy had a very successful free people population, probably in part because of the plantation system. She said she had a habitation, a plantation in Haiti, what we call Haiti now. So, and she also said that she had come to New Orleans with a slave woman. Now, some of this is lies. Okay, some of this I know it's lies because they went to court and it was proven that the things that she said could not have been true. So but she did own some women And she did own some women. In what capacity? That's the $64,000 question. Was she a person who owned people, exploited them, put them up on auction when she was finished? Don't know. Was she a person who knew they were enslaved, let them try to buy their freedom, or emancipated them later? I don't find a record of it, you know. The relationships between free people of color and the enslaved, the relationships between white people and the enslaved, it's a lot of questions, right? Because, and here's, let me tell you how I answer it. You know, there are people who have housekeepers who are immigrants, right? They have housekeepers that may not have official papers, you know, residency papers. I think there are people who will help the people that work for them get somewhere, get their papers, become citizens. I think there are people who will threaten these people every day and say, if you don't do what I tell you to do, I'm going to send the police after you, right? I think that is human nature. And I don't see white people's human nature, Creole's human nature, Black people's human nature as being any different. I think that you're going to find people who are going to exploit other people. I think you're going to find people who are going to be nice to other people in the circumstances that they have. And that's the answer that I have for myself. Do I know which individual was a nice person and which one was not? I do not know. I do not know. I can't make that determination. But I do know that human nature has not changed since Adam and Eve, you know. It hasn't changed since the Garden of Eden. The man killed his brother, you know. I mean, so, you know, if they were doing that back then, we're not much. Laws have changed as a result of people wanting something different, you know, people having the will to try to change something that they think is unfair. You know, that's what has changed. We don't have slavery, but slavery was legal at the time.
Yeah. And so that's like a perfect way to go into actually what was my next question. My next question is, in the pursuit of rights, there are economy members who use the courts to fight against injustice. Do you have an example of a kind of using the courts to fight against injustice with those economy members?
Right. Yeah, I do. Well, the one that comes to mind right offhand is Charles Sauvinet. Because Charles Sauvinet was a civil sheriff of New Orleans for a while. He went into a coffee house and he was refused a drink. And so he sued the coffee house. He won the first, I think it was the first monetary damages suit for civil rights. I know there was a woman around the same time, I think she was 2 weeks later actually, who went into a candy store and did something similar. But Charles Sauvinet did. There were another couple of fellows who went into opera house who used the courts. You know, what happened? Let me just for a little history. What happened is that legally people got rights, right, from the 14th, 15th Amendments, right? So they got rights constitutionally. So these people were using test cases to make sure that they could secure these rights locally. And that's what they were doing. That's what the opera house people did, definitely. And there were others.
Oh, thank you. And so in those cases, what about later on in the Plessy versus Ferguson case? Are there any common members between the Société d'économie et Comité des citoyens?
Murtio Piron was on the Comité des citoyens, and he was a president of the economy. He was a member of the Economy Society. But most of these people knew each other. And they had been involved in Reconstruction movement. You know, they had been working together for equal rights for a long time. Some of them parted ways. They parted ways because some were committed, like equal rights purists, I would say. And some people saw a need to make compromises in order for the masses of Black people to get more advantages.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I may be
This
going
is
into too
rich.
much
No,
detail. I don't know.
no, this is rich. No, there's a lot in this book. There's so much. I mean, it is so rich. Everyone should have it.
Well,
And
thank
that's what I said. It touches on so much. It touches on so much, and you see the overlap of the membership. You see the history. Nothing's in a. These people aren't in a vacuum. As things are changing, you see it changing inside of the story that you're telling, and
right.
it's lyrical. It reads like poetry. It's beautiful. You literally transport us. I feel just transported into New Orleans, the New Orleans of that time.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Hmm.
I
Oh,
really,
absolutely.
I'm a fiction writer, so
Hmm.
I used a lot of the fictional devices because most people don't read history, I mean, it's just, especially long books like this, most people don't read them. So you need a story. We all need stories to remember things, so I
Yes,
tried to sort of hook it on one person and tell his story as it intersected with history.
absolutely. And you did that very well.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's enthralling. Absolutely.
I appreciate that.
Yes. And so, touching on something else. Okay,
Mhm.
what about military service? In your book, you talked about the regiments,
Mhm.
that are free people of color, and do you see in the economy members people who had served in the military?
Well, yes, there quite a
Mhm.
few of them served.
Okay.
Henry Louis Ray is the one that probably is the most outspoken and well known that
Hmm.
served in the military. New York Times interviewed him when he was in the Native Guards. Uh, he and Sauvinet was a French speaker. I'm sure Ray was too, but Sauvinet acted as the translator when the Native Guards went from being a Confederate militia to
Hmm.
becoming part of the Union Army. Now, that is a bug in a lot of people's bonnet, right? Why were they Confederates? Um, it's another question. It's another thing that raises a lot of questions to me. Um, but because I know Bouguille's history and because I knew the history of a lot of the people in there whose parents had been in the Battle of New Orleans or who had been in the Haitian Revolution, if you look at these people who came out of the Haitian Revolution and then joined the Civil War, you'll know that in the Haitian Revolution, people made alliances with whoever would take care of them. If they needed to win a skirmish over here, they would align with whoever. It didn't matter, and then before they moved on. So when these free people of color, this particular group, because I'm not speaking for all of them, when this particular group went into the Confederate service, I believe they did it in the same way that their fathers did it in the Haitian Revolution. They aligned with whoever would arm them, right, or would allow them to have arms. And then as soon as those people left, they just joined the next group, right? So they joined the Confederates, then a little while later, they joined the Union. In fact, you have Henry Louis Ray saying this, and it's kind of interesting to me. They'll say certain things. I've seen the quotes where he said that if, I don't know if it was Ray or somebody else, they said if we didn't join, they would have forced us to be in the service, right? When the Union Army came into New Orleans, all of these people stayed and the rebels ran. So the white Confederates abandoned New Orleans. These guys stayed, and they stayed because they were basically joining, not because they had an idea that they were going to fight for the Confederates, but they had an idea that they were going to defend their homes. So they didn't really matter to them which side they were on. They just wanted to defend their homes. And in my way of thinking, you can have a gun then, you can have your weapons, right? Nobody's going to question the fact that you have your weapons. That's what I think.
That's right.
Yeah. There may be a lot of other people that think a lot of other things. And I don't, I'm going on because this is something that people get stuck on, and I guess I'm stuck on it too. I think that they were there to defend their homes. Now, were some of them racist? I don't find that big racism in the economy society because I read the whole 3,000 pages and never did I see anything about this one's dark skinned, or we're not going to allow these people, or some. I never did see that in the whole thing, right? But were some of them prejudiced? Who knows? Probably. Individuals are prejudiced. Did some of them own slaves? Probably so. Did some of them think that the Confederate service was okay? Maybe so, right? But I know Bogiel in the group that I'm writing about did not. That's what I know. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that insight.
Yeah.
And going back to the military, I saw it in Economy Hall is in your writings about Andre Caillou.
Yeah. Right.
And I saw from one newspaper's description, I think that might have been L'Union, and then the other newspaper's description, which was so derogatory.
Right.
And so going back to those newspapers and having had the conversation here with Mr. Mark Rudenay, who is attending right now. Yeah. Do you have any other connections that you can share with us between the members of the Société and the writers or editors of L'Union or La Tribune?
Well, the Union and the Tribune would come to Economy Hall lots. They wrote about the Economy Society. They wrote about the Economy Society as being a strong philanthropic organization. They were there during the Republican Party. They were there when they had a big mass meeting where they created a petition to go to Lincoln. Bertineau and Rudenay, and a third person whose name I'm blanking on, went to see Lincoln. And that petition started in Economy Hall. The idea actually started 2 weeks before the grand meeting. It started actually in a French meeting of the Economy Society. And then a few weeks later, it was done in an English language or a bilingual meeting. So they were all around the same group, and they all had these very progressive ideas. That's one thing you do see going through this sort of progressive idea from the beginning all the way to the end. They supported progressive causes.
Absolutely. And so also as I was looking through their progressive causes and their fight for equality, the massacre of 1866 is also mentioned there. And so Monsieur Bogiel, he was there?
He was there, actually.
Okay.
He was there.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, Bogiel actually spoke to the committee that investigated the massacre. So I was able to, Karen Cosette Bell mentioned in her book the massacre, right, which was called the New Orleans Riot. She mentioned it, and then she had such a wonderful book, but I was wanting more. I wanted to hear the voices of the people more, right? So when I went back to the actual transcript of the riot, which is available online, or the massacre, it's available online. I found Bogiel and several economy members, like Lucien Kaplan was there, the Crockers were there, A. Crocker was there. There were several men who were actually economy members who were at that, who testified later to the committee to talk about the massacre. They witnessed it. They were eyewitnesses. So I had to put that in the book.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And so are there any details you wanted to share, or anything else you wanted to share about what you came across? Well,
Bogiel witnessed the people coming in. I'm sorry, I keep hitting the microphone. Bogiel witnessed the people coming into the hall, and he was trying to get out. And he gives a very detailed description about trying to push out the door. And he pushed there was a man in front of him, and he pushed his way out of the door, but the crowd grabbed the man in front of him and killed him, or took him away. And Bogiel was able to escape out the door because they had just taken the guy in front of him. That was one thing. The other thing was that I believe it was Kaplan, but I'm not positive, who came with his son just to watch the proceedings, to show the son how democratic proceedings go, and his son was stabbed and lost an eye from that event. So there's a mention just a very small mention in the economy journals about that he was not there at a particular meeting, or his son was sick or something. I'm not quite sure, but I remember there was some reference to either he or his son being sick. And I think that either he or his son died a year or two later. And I suspect that it was from complications from these stabbings and shootings and that sort of thing, you know. So it was a real, it was a real massacre. Yeah.
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 So it's terrible, terrible. And just to be able to read that as you did in those entries, in those ledgers.
Yeah, a lot of something in the ledgers, and then in our documents, you know, and in our American documents, you can just read some terrible stuff, you know. I mean, you can read the census of 1850 has some very racist stuff in it, you know, about people not having any history, you know, people coming from Africa not having any history, not having any morals, you know. This is public knowledge that this is in our American documents. You know, you read newspapers and you can see the way that newspapers sort of turned to become very white supremacist by the end of the 19th century. It just, you can see the same propaganda that you're seeing now. You see how propaganda in the major media, the newspapers were the media of the day. You can see the propaganda that went on in that. In fact, Hersey, I think his name is, the editor of a New Orleans newspaper. I believe it might have been the States, but I'm not sure which one at that time, said that we bulldozed the people, you know. He said we bulldozed it. They were very proud of it, you know. And without being too political, I would like us to make comparisons to the fake news that we see now, you know, things that are not true, that people know are not true, and they say it anyway because it is getting to a place that they would like to get, which is what happened then. They wanted people to get away from the polls. So what they did was first propaganda, then murder. Okay, that is the pattern that I am seeing. I saw it in the 19th century. I saw it in the 1960s. I'm seeing it now.
Wow. Wow. And that was one of my last questions. Is you're being a journalist, and then being from New Orleans, having written this history down for us all, what is it that you would like for us to do with this? And you're answering it.
I am. I mean, you know, it's the whole point of history. I mean, what it resonated to me when, you know, it first resonated to me because I saw the names of the people I knew, you know, the surnames of the people I knew. I'm saying, how come these people are in these books and I never knew this about their history, right? So when you look at history, you start to see parallels, you know. If you look at the long length of history, and I'm not just talking about racist history, you know, I'm talking about like human history. You know, how can we say that people are any different if we know, like I said in the Bible, you know, Cain killed Abel, you know? I mean, you look at the long sweep of human nature and you see, what do people do and how do they do it, right? So we know what people did. And then if you look at the history of Louisiana, you will see how they did it, right? And did it when equal rights came up, when people got equal rights, when people of African descent got equal rights, there was a backlash to it, right? So there was a backlash to it. And that backlash took the place of propaganda in the major media, which was newspapers at that time. And violence. Those were the two things that happened. So there was violence against people who tried to exercise their rights. People tried to go to the courts. The courts became unsuccessful after a while. For a while, the courts supported them. After a while, the courts did not support them anymore. That's the pattern that you see in the 1960s that I lived through, right? We got rights, went to the courts to try to enforce them. Our leaders were killed, right? I'm seeing it. I feel like we're walking through it again, you know. So if we can learn anything from this very long book and my very long explanations, is that we should look at what happened. We should see how it was done, and we should not step in that same hole again.
Wow. Yes, amen to that. Do you want to open it up now, Scott, to everyone? Okay. Any questions? Any more questions?
Let me ask a quick question to start off with. I wanted to ask two quick things. One is just the reasons and the causes that the Société kind of just stopped operating after a certain while. And the other one was, do you mind going a little bit over the jazz history? I know obviously it is the thick of where jazz emerges, so it must have had a huge hand in that, as you were saying, with the Carnegie Hall of Jazz.
Right. Your first question was, Scott, my brain is frazzled.
Just, the reasons why the Société.
Oh, why they stopped. I believe the reason they stopped is because by the 1950s, you started seeing Black insurance companies. You started seeing Black insurance companies and Black funeral homes really coming to the fore. So at that point, people were not, they were not having burials or having wicks in their houses anymore, or were not having them at the hall. They were having them in a funeral home, right? And you had insurance, so people had health insurance and they had more doctors available. And so they really didn't need a society doctor. They could go to the doctor, right? Yeah. Okay. And the other one was jazz, right? Yeah. What I saw was that in Economy Hall, they had been having music since it was built. Like the first weekend it started, they had dances and stuff. So but they were more classical, what we would call classical music, like the quadrilles and the waltzes and stuff. And as the end of the 19th century approached, the popular music was jazz music, right? Or it was becoming jazz music. So I talked to Michael White once, and he said it was like, excuse the New York fire engines. He said that the music of jazz was at first like compared to like the way people heard hip hop when it first came out. It's like, oh, we're not going to put hip hop in our fancy places, right? But then it began to infuse the popular music, and that music came into Economy Hall. And because Economy Hall was already set up for dances, and the people just came to Economy Hall. Yeah.
Awesome. Those were two questions that I had as well.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I don't have a question. I just have a comment that for those of you who may not have had a chance to read the book yet, I hope everyone has, but maybe if you're looking ahead to the holiday season and thinking about gifts, we will have a paperback edition of Economy Hall. We're really excited. Is coming out this fall, and it will be available at the Louisiana Book Festival for those of you in Louisiana at the end of this month, and then for sale in independent bookstores everywhere, as well as at the historic New Orleans collection. So congratulations to Fatima on this amazing achievement.
Thanks, Jessica. Thanks for the paperback. You can carry it in your book bag now, everybody.
Yes. And did you have a question, Mark?
Yes, I joined Jessica in thanking you and everyone. I think we can speak, I can speak on behalf of everyone thanking you for this book. It actually, I've read this book twice. First, I read it through quickly, and then I read it through for all kinds of other reasons. And one of the things I was rereading for was your use of literary devices, which I think you're just great at. It's what made the book so readable. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, as an author, I struggle with this sometimes also, how you let the reader know what happened versus what may have happened. Mm-hmm. How do you juggle? Okay, how do you juggle between documentary evidence, which you have tons of, and what you're imagining happened in a certain sequence of events? Right. It's like, how do I know when you're going from fact to what some authors have called faction? Yeah. Which I really like. I like faction. I don't have a problem with that. But how do you signal the reader that you're making that transition? how do you make that distinction without using too many measly qualifiers, like it could have been, or maybe, or, that kind of thing? How do you deal with that as an author?
Well, you have to put in the qualifiers, certainly in your first 4 drafts, right? The qualifiers are all in there. But there are things that you know that you're going to do and you're not going to do. So the things that you know you're going to do is anything that is anything like in that book, anything that's a quote is a real thing, right? I'm not making up any quotes. Okay. Anything that is direct, like I say, Lujabogio crossed Canal Street, right? I know he had to cross Canal Street because in his testimony, he said he was on Canal Street and he was going to the Mechanics Hall. Mechanics Hall is on the other side of Canal Street. So he had to cross Canal Street. So I said it, he crossed Canal Street. Now, when I say he was thinking, right? I can't say he was thinking because who knows what people are thinking. But I can say he was thinking it if he just told somebody that, right? So if he just said, I'm running late, I can put he was thinking about how late he was, right? If he just told somebody that in some document that I have. If I have no evidence that he said anything like that, I have to say he may have been running late, right? But in fact, he did say that in the testimony that he got there early before the ceremony began. So I can say that he crossed Canal Street and waited, right? Or he crossed Canal Street and he was there early. Or he crossed Canal Street and he was there before anyone else or before most of the people. All of those are facts. How do I decide that? I can only go to facts. And when I have facts in it, the facts are facts. If it's something I conjectured, like a thinking about something or could have happened, I'll say that. I have to say it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
As an editor, I get so many book proposals. Happy to see Clint Bruce on the line as well, another person who kind of has done one of the highest quality works I've ever been privileged to work with. But we get a lot of book proposals, and I remember reading Fatima's initial proposal, which was a little different for us. We have only published nonfiction, and I was, Mark, I was worried about all the same things, like how is she going to be able to sustain this balance? And there are Fatima, 1,000 endnotes in this book. And so I know that editorially, we were able to become very comfortable with the balance of qualifiers and statements because everything was so meticulously documented. And then Fatima would, indicate things, that if she was talking about the heat or the discomfort of physical bodies and spaces, that she had been to the newspapers and knew what the temperature was that day, and that if she was talking about a city block, that she could pull out the reams and reams and reams of archival materials that supported every observation that she was scripting in the book. And that is not normal in my experience for people who tried to write this sort of nonfiction. So I just want to again give props to Fatima for the astounding depth of research that allowed her then to apply her magic touch as a lyrical author of historical nonfiction.
Thank you. Thanks, Jessica. I'll tell you something else. When I have walked the streets too. I went down the streets where the houses were and knew where the sun set. This is what journalists do, right? You go there and you at a certain time of day. And now maybe the sun set a little differently in the 1850s, but you have a sense of where west is and how it hits the wall, and where it would hit on the wall, so I did a lot of that. Like I did a lot of walking around the first few years. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Oh, this is a rich conversation. I can see you walking through New Orleans right now.
I did that street that in the Faubourg Marigny, like from
Yeah.
where the first meeting was held. I must have circled that block a zillion times. And then I walked down that street to see where how far one person lived from another person, you know,
Mhm.
get a sense of where they lived. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Any other questions or any other comments?
A couple of us have our hands raised.
Oh, yeah, I
got it.
see
Oh,
you,
you
Dr.
have to go.
Bruce. Okay, Clint Bruce.
So first of all, thank you for elucidating, or I really appreciated Mark's question and your answer to it. I'm also working on another project that involves some inferences and I'm grappling with that. So anyway, another conversation. What I'm actually curious about is, so here in this circle and when I'm in Louisiana, I'm surrounded by people who are interested in Creole history or who know about New Orleans culture, but this book has reached a much wider audience. And you've been doing a fabulous job, getting the word out about the book, receiving invitations, giving talks. So I'm wondering, what are the big surprises for people outside of Louisiana when they learn about the cultural universe? What just blows them away about what was going on in South Louisiana, in New Orleans during these years? I'm really curious to know.
Mm-hmm. I think, because I don't know what other people think, right? But I think that people are surprised to know that there were so many free people of color, or even that what that means, free people of color. Most people know American history, Anglo-American history, and they know that there were in the South, there were plantations and there were enslaved people. And beyond that, that's all I know. So to find out that there were free people of color, that free people of color had a certain amount of agency is surprising to them. That free people of color owned slaves, and that it would be, and then now it falls into another category, another stereotype. It's like they owned slaves, so they must be horrible people, I think those are the two biggest ones. I'll tell you what surprised me. I was surprised to find out that almost half the Black people in New Orleans were free people of color. That the rest of the country, including the North, where people had legal rights, was only 14% on average, and we were 45%. So that to me was just like really surprising. Yeah.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for that. And then I see also Mr. Kendrick Perkins, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. So I wrote some terrible notes, but I wanted to ask a question. I've actually sent an email to Fatima before. Kathy connected us. So I know that you probably can't provide a lot of stuff, but reading your book, reading Clint's book, and also looking through Le Union. I'm in school right now, and for my thesis, I am focusing on Paul Morphy. Well, I was focusing on Paul Morphy, but now I'm focusing on him. I'm doing a comparative analysis between him and his half-brother. Paul Morphy was born in 1837. His half-brother was born in 1842. And I would love to share the names and things like that. I'm not going to do that simply because a lot of people have been telling me, and Fatima, from what I understand, you kind of experienced this, just intellectual property, people kind of taking information and running with it. So I'm a little hesitant to, name the person specifically. But I want to throw out just some things. One question I want to know was, the person that I'm studying, his half-brother, he was, to me, he was pretty famous in his own right. Paul Morphy was a 19th century chess master. A lot of people know him through popular culture, but his half-brother, who was of African ancestry, he was an alderman. Well, first of all, he was, he served in the 2nd Native Guard, which I appreciate because, the 1st Native Guard, I know that was the times and things like that, but it still kind of rubs me a little wrong that they kind of went with the Confederacy. And I understand that, they had to choose whatever side was more favorable to them at the time. But I appreciate the fact that my person who I'm studying, he was in the 2nd Native Guard. So, he waited for whatever reason.
Mhm.
He was an alderman in, I want to say 1869 in the 7th Ward. So one of the things I want to know was, I'm trying to study 7 wards early history. When did the ward, whole system kind of became more popular, and when people started identifying, what ward they were from and things like that. I feel like he might have been one of the earliest politicians in that area when the boundary of the 7th Ward was, around St. Aug, the boundaries, that part came in the early 20th century. But, the Marigny, where there's Elysian Fields, Good Children, and Esplanade, that part of the Marigny, that was like the 7th Ward, the original 7th Ward. Then it started to expand up and kind of go to the right a little bit. But he was the 7th Ward House of Representative in 1870 during Reconstruction. He passed an very interesting law that would have impacted a lot of people born under common law relationships. So I guess one of the questions is there some kind of book or articles that I can read that would tell me about early 7th Ward history? I actually came across a good article by Rashana Johnson, and it was called Le Bon Temps Roulé and Other something. But that was the whole title. And she really went in detail about the Marigny and how those relationships between free women of color and European men of wealth, how they were able to acquire a lot of property. And the person who I'm studying, his mother lived in the Marigny and she owned property, and she was part of that kind of relationship. So yeah, I would like to know some readings that'll possibly help me to understand early politics in the 7th Ward. But let me just throw out these quick other names. I don't know if you've all heard of True Friends Hall. He was my person who I'm studying was the president of the sub club of the Republican Party, and they held a meeting at the True Friends Hall. He had beef with the 7th Ward Mothers Club. And when I looked up 7th Ward Mothers Club at NOPL, I couldn't find anything at the New Orleans Public Library. There was also the Laborer Protective, Benevolent, and Mutual Aid Society. As a representative, he tried to get funding for that organization. He was also part of the 7th Ward Warmouth Defenders. So, Nick, who has written, he was an editor for Monumental, which talks about Oscar Dunn. I've been talking to him a lot, trying to get his opinion, but it looks like my guy actually probably, was a political opponent of his guy. So, that's going to be pretty interesting. But I think those are the.
If you want to look at property things, look at Campanella, just like for certain basic stuff. Richard Campanella talks about districts and that sort of thing. I think in 1852, the boundaries of the 7th Ward were established around the 1850s. I think the ones that sort of stayed, there was some change made between the 6th Ward and the 7th Ward later on, but I think those 1852 boundaries were pretty static. You will see in the time of Reconstruction that when they were doing voting and doing representatives, you saw people representing the 7th Ward and Algiers, and you'll see people representing those areas. So they were solidly in existence by the 1860s. What else can I tell you? Early histories of the 7th Ward, they're not that. Oh, I know, the architecture series. Read the architecture series, the New Orleans architecture series, because they have some nice things. They did something on the Creole faubourgs, which is good, but for me the better one was the Bayou Road one, the one that said Faubourg something in the Bayou Road. Esplanade Ridge and the Bayou Road. I think that one gave me more detailed about who was living where, and they mentioned a lot of free people of color. But what you'll find is names, these names connected in all sorts of places. That was one of the slow parts of doing this book. You know, I had to read a lot and then sort of make these connections for my own self. They were like, these people were involved in politics. These people were related, you know, because they were intermarried. These people were, you know, now if you're looking for the true friends, look for their French name too. Look for sincere ami, right? I hope I see how every time I say a French word, I look at Rudy and Scott to see how is my pronunciation now. With the sincere ami, might be the true friends, may have been the true friends when they was speaking French, You'll see. So when you're looking up these English names, also look for their French names. You might find them like that too. You might find an earlier history of them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for these wonderful questions. And my goodness, I can't say thank you enough to Fatima Shaik for being here with us. And please let us know whenever you'll be back in New Orleans.
Soon, very soon.
I'll be running.
I'll be at the Louisiana Book Fair hawking paperbacks.
The paperbacks. Oh, when is the Louisiana Book Fair? So we know.
Louisiana Book Festival.
Festival,
It's,
yeah.
September 29th in Baton Rouge.
September?
And I will also be at the La Creole Conference, which is
That's
October
coming up.
22nd at
Mhm,
Xavier
yeah.
University.
Okay.
So my huge fan club can join me there.
Absolutely.
I feel like I'm preaching to the converted here.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much for taking the time out to join us, everyone. And I hope the rest of your day goes wonderfully. Any other last comments, Scott or Rudy?
I think we're in great shape. Thank you all so much for everything.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks, Taylor.
Thank you.
All right.
Bonne journée.
Okay.
Bonne journée.
Bonne journée.